You've heard these two very enthusiastic people who are doing wonderful things. You have a huge problem in Greece. I think you told me earlier, 60% unemployment among young people. What do you need? And how much is what they're offering useful to you?
Joe, what the corporates are doing is a lot of good work bottom up, but policymakers have to be concerned top down. I heard at the beginning of today's event, Dr. George Logothetis speaking very passionately about the need to empower young people in the developing world. But I would argue that the developed world has similar negative structural trends. When I attended a year ago the annual World Bank Ministerial Summit in Tokyo, you heard all the ministers from the developing countries saying their biggest challenge is to create jobs for their young population. But then you heard the ministers from the developed world saying exactly the same thing, that if you look together at the developed world, we're suffering from an aging population relative to the developing world. We're suffering from a high level of debt and reducing relative competitiveness. If you look at the latest UN data, most of the FDI now doesn't come to our part of the world. It's actually going to the developing world. So we need, as Europeans, and I would dare to say that there is not yet sufficient leadership at the European level to solve the problem. We need to think top down. What are we doing in Greece, for example? We're working on 5 policy pillars. We're working on restabilizing the economy, and I'm pleased to say that this year we're going to meet a budget objective and recession is better than we thought. We're working on structural reforms, and I think fiscal and structural is where most of the European and developed world countries need to work. We need to rebuild our competitiveness. We're working on changing the investment climate, is what the Concordia Index said before, as the readiness of the economy. We're trying to enhance liquidity, which is still a problem in some parts of the world, and we're trying to find catalysts of growth through privatizations. But this is the top-down. Bottom-up, we're also working together with the industry. A lot of big multinationals are now increasing their production in Greece. They're increasing their R&D capacity in Greece. We're trying to empower young people through entrepreneurship to develop new projects. I'm very pleased to say that Greece, who had 700 million of inflows this year from big multinationals investing in startups in Greece, something that was far from our culture till a couple of years ago. We're working on a dual apprenticeship program, learning from the German example on how do you empower people not only in education, but also in the workforce with practical example. But I think the key point for me, and that's what I want to leave today, is that finding jobs for the entire young population in the developed world will be a big challenge, and the generation that follows ours is the first generation, probably after the Second World War, which doesn't have the confidence that they will live better than the previous generation.
Mm-hmm.